Welcome to the Nurses Out Loud radio show. We will be starting in a few moments, so please stay tuned. If you are watching on social media, please give us a like, share, and follow. And for those of you who would like some more info, please go check us out at nursesoutloud.com. Thank you.
Imagine for a moment that the government knocks on your door, not to protect your family, but to tell you what to inject into your child's body. Imagine being told your beliefs don't matter, your faith doesn't count, and your conscience has no place in the courtroom. That's not fiction. That's what happened in Indiana. The Department of Child Services tried to override a mother's religious exemption and vaccinate her biological children who are in foster care against her wishes. The state argued it knew better. That policy outweighed belief. But then something remarkable happened. A team of courageous attorneys, supported by our very own nurse Ashley Grogg, stood up and said, no, you cannot legislate faith. You cannot coerce consent. And the court agreed. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a moral one. It reminded the nation that liberty isn't granted by the government. It's protected from it. Today, we're not going to debate science or statistics. We're going to talk about ethics, about what happens when policy collides with conscience, and why nurses, more than anyone else, must hold the moral line. Ashley Grogg joins me now to unpack the story behind the headlines, the provisions of nursing ethics that guide us, and the growing global movement to reclaim integrity in healthcare. Ashley, welcome to Nurses Out Loud.
Thanks so much for having me, Jodi. Always love chatting with you.
I know, same. I love it so much. And I was so excited about this victory. And so I'd like you to just take us inside the case, like what happened and how did you find yourself helping to shape such a pivotal outcome?
Yeah. So, first of all, I have the client's permission. It's not my client. I'm not an attorney. None of this is legal advice. This is just kind of an experience and sharing with our listeners out there some of the tips and tools, of course. So Jodi and I, we're not attorneys. We're not giving legal advice. Make sure you consult with an attorney. But oddly enough, my cousin's wife, so my cousin is an attorney, and she had this case that she acquired. They came to her and hired her as the private attorney rather than using a court-appointed attorney for this. It's called CHINS, Child in Need of Services. So there's something that has happened, some form of abuse or neglect that has happened, that these children have been removed from their home. There, in this case, are 5 children, and they're in different placements. And so, all of these children's foster placements started petitioning DCS at the same time to vaccinate these children. And mom had used a religious exemption prior. She had one on file with the school. So this is not a new issue. This was just, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to speculate. I have my suspicions that this is probably bullying. But so Lindsay, the attorney, family law attorney, called me because she knows that I do all this advocacy and have worked in this realm. And so she said, hey, what can I do? What's the law pertaining vaccinations? Pull out all the stops. We've got to help protect these kids and their mother's religious freedom. And I said, yeah, no problem. We went through the different exemptions for childcare, which is daycare, and for our school system. We have both of those codified. So it's in law that parents can use a religious exemption. I had remembered from other work I had done that our foster care language there is a requirement for the kids to be up to date on vaccination unless a parent or guardian has a religious belief that exempts them. And so, I was like, these are great places to start. And that's another aspect of it was there was just a new bill passed, which I fought against. I was very outspoken. It was a parental rights bill, and it said your parental rights for upbringing, medical decisions, education, and religion are absolute unless there's a compelling governmental interest. And for me, I was like, no.
Yeah.
There is no compelling governmental interest that overrides parental rights, period. And the people who were advocating for this bill said, well, this makes the state apply the strictest level of scrutiny. This is already given federally. This is part of our federal constitution. Parental rights are a fundamental right, and so strict scrutiny has to be applied. I would rather be proven wrong than not use a tool that we have, because this bill just passed. I would rather be proven wrong than not use a tool and have to eat my words than these kids get vaccinated because I refuse to be humble, right? Okay. So I called a constitutional attorney here in our state who is a good friend of mine. And I said, hey, what can we do? Let's go through this. The three of us, the family law attorney, Lindsay, myself, and Michelle, the constitutional law attorney, kind of sat down virtually, actually, and we brainstormed and we worked through all the different layers, made sure that we could brief the case beforehand, so that way all the facts were laid out and there was no question that this family had the right to religious exemption. And we were certain we were going to lose. We prepared mom. We said, look, we're probably going to lose. The court is going to override this. They'll often say that vaccination is a compelling governmental interest for public health or whatever. And just know that we're going to lose. But by using this statute that we don't like, it gave us a greater opportunity to appeal whatever decision came out. And so we walked through all the steps and tried to prepare everything so there were no surprises. And we were really concerned that if the judge, ordered in favor of DCS, so to get these kids vaccinated, that they would be vaccinated before we could appeal. That's a very real problem. So for families out there that might be in these situations, get help sooner rather than later. Because if your attorney just isn't knowledgeable about these things, it could become a problem real fast. And so I feel very blessed to have been able to not only be able to consult on this case and support this family, but also have friends that I can count on to pull in our different backgrounds and really make sure that we covered all our bases.
Right. I mean, really, what I love about this story is it does demonstrate like the power of even one nurse, to who knows the ethics and who knows the law. And through your work with Hoosiers for Medical Liberty and your new book out, what's the title of your new book? Resuscitating Nursing. You just demonstrated that in the case. I mean, you weren't just supporting a lawyer or a mother, but you were really embodying the code of ethics, and that's advocating for the patient's rights and safety. But you did say something that I don't know if you want to opine on a little bit with me, because the mother had a religious exemption on file. Okay. And DC, we call it DCFS, but DCS, Department of Child and Family Services, or, whatever, it is in your state. It's basically the same, the same. They knew that she had a religious exemption for vaccine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, it's funny too, because one of the details of the case was the fact that historically DCS or DCFS, whatever you want to call it, they had asked the mom in prior years for the exemption for school because the foster parents needed it for registering for school. Okay. And so this wasn't new. This isn't something that had changed. And that's kind of why I feel, in my opinion, this is a case of bullying. They're trying to kind of push this mom around, and
Right.
it's very difficult to think about how things could have gone because she's kind of at their mercy, right? If she didn't have somebody to help advocate for him or for her. And this is what happens in a lot of cases is these parents, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're trying desperately to get their children back. They're being bullied by these governmental entities. And then they're just like, fine, do it because I want to get my kids back. I can't stand the thought of them, being gone for another day. And so they just acquiesce under duress.
Right. I mean, we're not here to talk about why her kids are in foster care or anything like that, but we have to remember that, maybe the state did have to step in and protect the kids.
It was not medical neglect. And this particular case, I can't get into the details. I don't feel comfortable getting into the details, but I can tell you with certainty, there was no medical neglect. And I think that boded in her favor because, and the attorney, the family law attorney, Lindsay, she even said that in court. Your Honor, medical neglect has never been an issue in this case. This was a conscious decision that mom made for these children. And DCS had thrown it up in the mom's face, kind of saying like, well, you partially vaccinated one of the children was partially vaccinated. And so it makes us believe that this is neglect. And I just did a show Tuesday with both of the attorneys. So if you want to hear more about this case from the attorney's perspective, go listen to that show. It's amazing.
What's the title?
Oh, that's a great question, Jodi. Of course you'd ask me that. It has something with it, like Indiana Family Wins or something. It's been so crazy lately because
I know.
This case and all the things and I'm trying to work on a resource sheet for other families so that way if they get in this situation, they can kind of march through as well as reaching out for help, right? But we were talking, DCS had thrown this up and Lindsay did a great job of saying, look, there's no medical neglect. This has not been an issue. And they've started pushing on her religious beliefs and started questioning, what are your religious beliefs that make this so? And they actually had testimony from a pastor that she used to attend the church say, hey, there is no specific belief that our church follows that says you cannot vaccinate. And, I was sitting there and thank goodness, because this is really out of the scope of practice for a family attorney. These constitutional issues aren't typically in their purview. And so I was able to pass a note up to Lindsay and say, hey, they cannot push a religious test on this family. That's something that's constitutional. The courts and the way that they put it cannot dissect the mother's religious belief. So your religion is personal. It's unique to you. It does not have to come out of a specific book or doctrine or be believed by others. And I think that was another huge part of this case that was good for the mom, that we were able to advocate for her in that way. Because again, if it was left up to her, Lord only knows, what she would have said. And she was struggling. And then moving forward, this is we can cite that code, that Supreme Court, I guess not code, we can cite that Supreme Court decision that they cannot dissect the person's religious belief, even if they are struggling to articulate the beliefs. And so I think that's really important, especially when we look at this. We do these shows all the time, every year, about vaccination exemptions, right, for hospitals. Yeah. And they ask you ahead of time to explain your religious beliefs. I'm encouraging people to start quoting the Supreme Court case, and I should have probably had it. I didn't think about talking about this, but there's a Supreme Court case in Indiana, actually, from the early, I think it was in the late 1989 or something like that, 1981, somewhere in there.
Was it Thomas versus the Review Board?
Yes, that's it.
1981.
It was in the I put it in the press release. So yeah.
Yeah, reminding the state that the government has no business examining someone's theology.
Yep. And I think we
That's
need to
yeah.
start citing that when employers hand you that thing, the courts can't question this. This has no relevance in my religious exemption.
Hmm. Well, you remember with COVID, actually, the hospitals, they hired outside companies to sit down with someone and actually talk to them about their beliefs. Like, what? You guys, I don't know if y'all remember Lexi Kunzel. We just had her on the show a few weeks ago. She was the nurse who came out and, called out the doctor at the nurses station and about Charlie Kirk, who said that he was happy that Charlie died or he deserved it or something like that. And she's like, "You're a doctor. You're not supposed to say this." Well, in a little bit of background on her, the attorney that helped her when they put her on suspension was also the same attorney that she had to hire to sit in on a Zoom meeting when they were talking about religious exemptions because she didn't want to take the COVID shot. And you just think about this, how many people, I mean, I have so many nurses that, just took the flu shot so they don't have to wear a mask. And there's not many people who are willing to stand up and fight this. Because I mean, it really all comes down to our autonomy, right? We have the right to, to choose what we put in our own bodies and that's consistent with our own personal values.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I really encourage people. Obviously, I'm not an attorney. Am I an advocate? 100% all day, every day. And would encourage people to go back. If you're not sure about this, sure how to do this, go pick up a copy of Resuscitating Nursing in the workbook.
Mhm.
It'll walk you through all those things. But it's just a matter of saying, okay, what's right? What's wrong? Why do I believe what I believe? And how do I pull in the resources to support, you know, executing what is right?
Mhm.
Not folding, like a cheap card table
Yeah.
and rolling over to whatever the demands that are being made. And it's so hard, especially when you have these strong authorities that are trying to
Right.
push you in a direction you don't want to go. And that's exactly what this case was.
I mean, I think it's just so scary anytime the government steps in and says, "We're here to help," right? I mean, I don't know where that quote came from, but the last few years for me, I'm just like, oh my goodness, it's just crazy. I mean, even as an ER nurse, when we get patients coming in to the hospital, like for example, I had a patient just recently who brought in their baby, and the mother was distraught. She said, "Oh my goodness, she just got into a walker. She's moving around." And I turn and I look, and she has my nicotine vape pen in her mouth. And she rushed her into the emergency room. And, I'm kind of like giggling to the nurses, like, all I see is an AI video of this baby picking up the vape pen and inhaling it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that the baby doesn't know how to inhale, right? And I asked her, I was like, "Well, was the pen broken? Did she bite through it? And all of this." And she was like, "No, there was nothing there, but I'm a first time mom and I'm scared." And her husband were there. And thankfully, she had a doctor that was like, "Okay, non-toxic ingestion. Here's your discharge papers," right? Like there's nothing wrong. But certainly there could have been a nurse or a doctor that said, "Call DCFS, let them go out and assess the home environment and make sure it's safe." And now all of a sudden you are, you're parenting with the government. You know what I'm talking about, Ashley?
Yep, that is a very real concern I think that a lot of people face. And knowing your rights, I mean, I think that they're different state by state. I'm not sure, so I don't want to give any advice, but I think it's always a good idea to kind of know your rights as far as what you have to do and what you don't. Obviously, if you're taking your child into the hospital, that's a really scary situation because then they can take your child. But if your children are in your home, you have the right to say no until they show up with an officer here in Indiana. If they have a court order for those children, then, you have an issue. But immediately
Yeah.
calling and getting legal representation anytime CPS is involved, or DCS or DCFS or whatever
Mhm.
your state calls it, I would highly encourage people to reach out and talk to an attorney immediately. Find out what you legally have to do and what you don't have to do. What are they legally allowed to do with your children? Can they
Mhm.
question them by themselves? Can they not? Do you have to show them around your house? Because I've been told horror stories where they say, yeah, come in, look at the house, we've got food, everybody's got beds and pillows and blankets and all the things, and they still find a way to take those kids out of that home because they found whatever. Do I think that that is every DCFS worker, DCS, CPS, whatever? No, I don't think it is, but it just
Mhm.
takes that one person to look at you and judge you and decide you're not a good enough parent. You shouldn't have these children. You're not living up to my expectations of how you should be raising your children. And that's terrifying.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying. I told the mother, I said, if anything like this ever happens again, just call poison control. Call poison control and let them, guide you through what you need to look out for if you should go in. Because basically, let's just say the child head bit through, okay? Or the child gets into anything. Okay. The first thing I do is call poison control. I call poison control and I'll ask them, like, what do I need to look out for, assess, monitor? Can the patient go home? If they can, how long, all of those kinds of things. And then I document it. A lot of ER docs will always, say call poison control, because it's just another backup, and then we can guide them that way. So there's a little tip, from a ER nurse perspective, is call poison control. That could be, if the child isn't, changing their breathing patterns or their mentation or those kinds of things where, I asked her, I said, well, she looks great. She's happy. She's moving around. Has
You
she
look scared to
changed?
death.
You look scared to death. And it's really, again, it depends on the belief system of that nurse or that CPS worker. And you think how much control, you do have over this, that's, it's scary.
But
There was a situation with a friend of mine who is a social worker. And I asked her, well, what do you think is going to happen? What are the steps? And she goes, honestly, she goes, you got these workers that think they're going to change the world and save the world from all these people. But then you got people who think critically and logically like me, who's like, no, this is not a big deal. And, we can close the case, but you never know who you're going to get.
well, and that's what, when we were talking about it, Michelle, one of the attorneys, she said, because I asked point blank, I said, do you think that they're worried about liability? And that's why they always run through this checklist. Like, have they got their vaccinations? Da 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 da. And she goes, I think it's that they automatically presume and label these parents as incompetent because something happened. And in this case that we're talking about, it was not medical neglect. And what's crazy to me, without going into detail, is I feel like this poor mother tried to do what she thought was right, and it ended up costing her children. Like, she was
Mm,
genuinely trying to do what's right, and she ended up getting in trouble. And it's a horrible, my heart goes out to her because it's a horrible situation. I mean, she's not perfect, but golly, I'm not perfect either. And
no.
so Yeah, it's so hard. But Michelle said, I think that this is low hanging fruit to where they can feel good at the end of the day about doing something right. And she goes, some of them are out doing the Lord's work, vaccinating. That's direct quote from her, just putting these kids through the system and making sure they're getting all these things, because then, especially if they are super pro vaccine, even if it is a religious belief, not neglect, they don't care because they think that that's the best thing for the child and that's their view of the world.
Right, because they'll say, well, the state recommends this and the state knows better. But girl, I'm reading Aaron Siri's book, Vaccines, Amen. And I am just blown away. And we're going to do a show on that too, because, I'm sitting here at the nurses station and I'm talking and I was like, all right, guys, quiz time. What was the first vaccine that was ever recommended? And nobody got it right. Nobody. Okay. Probably 100 years of experience couldn't even answer that question correctly. And then they couldn't answer the clinical trial, how long the clinical trial was for. And I just told them, I'm like, we've been deceived. We literally have been deceived. We have thought that there were studies done and that this is safe and effective and it, has saved millions of lives. And that kind of culture of, starting from the education of, everyone, MDs, PAs, RNs, and then we've just repeated the same thing over and over and over again, to saying that this is truth when it certainly is not. And you know what? We have to take a break here real quick, but we're going to get back into the conversation of nurses in politics, because Ashley, I just adore her and her advocacy work and her work with resuscitating nursing. And, her website, easiest way to go is H4ml.org. That's H4ml.org. And guys, you are listening to Nurses Out Loud. I am your host, Nurse Jodi O'Malley. You can find us on iHeartRadio or at americaoutloud.news 5 days a week. All of our shows also go to podcasts, and I encourage you guys to check out americaoutloud.news. There's articles that drop every day. We have 24/7 shows that are played. You can download the America Out Loud Talk Radio app. And if there's anything that you're looking for that you may want to purchase supplement wise or anything like that, go check out americaoutloud.shop. And we will be right back after the break.
If you are a nurse that is fed up with the sick care model, I have a solution for you. My name is Melissa Schreibfetter, and I am the owner and founder of the Functional Nurse Academy. FNA is the most comprehensive functional medicine training program on the market, specifically tailored to nurses. It is self-paced and equips LPNs, RNs, and nurse practitioners to practice functional medicine, address the root causes of dysfunction, and start their independent functional medicine practices. At FNA, you will learn how to order labs, functional health reports, create customized wellness plans, package and price your services, and even how to market your brand effectively. Graduates earn 90 nursing CEUs, and then they qualify for multiple board certification titles. They also will have access to our exclusive tools, such as our Functional Nurse Toolkit, our social media and marketing kit. And I don't want to just train you and send you on your way. So you also will get access to me each month via the Functional Nurse Academy monthly mentorship program, where you will be able to attend a live class with me each month. So say goodbye to sick care and start your dream career as a functional medicine nurse. Enroll today at functionalnurseacademy.com.
Welcome back, guys. Thank you so much for joining me here on Nurses Out Loud. I am your host, Nurse Jodi O'Malley, and I am joined today by fellow co-host Nurse Ashley Grogg. She just came out with the book Resuscitating Nursing, and she also has a workbook attached to that. But her advocacy work is one of the things that really have drawn me near to her. And I'm just so excited that she is a host here on Nurses Out Loud, because there's a lot of nurses that may want to be in politics. I mean, maybe one day soon we'll see Nurse Ashley running for office. It would not surprise me. I know it's funny you say that, Ashley. I see Ashley's shaking her head right now. It's after I blew the whistle, just very shortly after, my attorney was like, "All right, so you're running for office. What are you running for?" And I go, "What? Huh? Running for office?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's what whistleblowers do. They run for office." And I was like, "Oh Lord Jesus, no way. That is not a calling on my life." I don't want to get into that. Hopefully. So why are you shaking your head, Ashley? Because you go into sessions. I know how busy you are. Like, talk about that a little bit.
Well, first of all, I am much more dangerous on the outside than I would be on the inside. When you are doing advocacy work, you can say and do a lot more things than what people can do when they're in the state house, when they're voting. Their scope is very limited, and they're playing this dance that's kind of crazy. And I always joke around and say I probably would be arrested if I worked in the hospital during COVID. And I'm pretty sure I'd probably be arrested if I had to go deal with the stuff down at the State House, because it's such a bully mentality down there. Like, you got to go along to get along. And if you're not a good little girl or boy, then we're going to take away all your committees and do all these things. And that's actually happened. We have a state senator here in Indiana who went against the establishment, the leadership's wishes, and they yanked him off of every committee. So his influence in the state legislature is very limited, because he doesn't get to vote on these committees and add amendments and all of these different things. That's just one aspect of the way that they are bullying him. And I wouldn't play that game. Like, I'm just not, me, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So office is not a place for me. Put me in a position where I can advocate for people, where I can use common sense, and I will thrive.
You have, I mean, your advocacy has went far beyond the bedside, working with legislators, advising attorneys, and mobilizing families to know their rights. How did this all evolve for you?
Well, God, let's start there.
Okay.
In all seriousness, it's funny because I've told this story before, but when I was working in the hospital, I had quit vaccinating. I was kind of a closet anti-vaxxer, right? And as time progressed, that just it became more and more difficult to get along. And I just realized the hypocrisy of it all and started researching other things. Left bedside, went to a more functional role in insurance, which is odd, but it worked for me. And then, it was 2016, 2018, the Samoan Islands, the Hasidic Jewish population. We saw how the measles outbreaks forced vaccination in Samoa, locked out of synagogue for the Jewish population in the Hasidic Jewish population, mind you, in New York. And I thought something big is happening. So went into the fact that, how do I stop this? And I came down to the fact that politics was the answer. And I hate politics. I'm not good at kissing backside. I'm very straightforward and very direct. And I don't like to be involved in things unless I think that we can move the needle. Like, I'm not going to waste my time or my breath. And so I was like, this is a weird jump for you, Ashley. Like, what are you doing? And argued with God for a little bit. But I went to a political leadership school and learned that you essentially get to bully the bully when you're an outside activist, and that politics is a numbers game. You just have to get enough people. So right before COVID, I started Hoosiers for Medical Liberty, and it was working with some legislators. I was very blessed. We had 2 amazing legislators that were in office in our state House of Representatives who were very passionate about this and were willing to do the hard things and stand up against the leadership or the establishment that was there. So we were able to put a lot of their colleagues on the record with bad votes about medical liberty and just work at those things. And as that goes, as you are talking and educating people, your community, about politics, you become like the guru, right? Everybody comes to you for advice. You're a problem solver. And it wasn't very long after that that I started getting questions about, people wanted to be foster parents but couldn't because they were denied licenses due to their vaccination status. People were in custody cases and their kids were being forced vaccinated. Those are different. Those are really hard. I'm not sure if we could win. We're looking at some different ways to attack that. The legal team and I are getting together to just see how we can develop arguments and work on protecting the parent who doesn't want vaccination and make sure that those kids stay free of vaccination. But and then you see these cases where kids are in DCS custody and they, for whatever reason, or false accusations of medical neglect. We have those quite a bit. And that new law that I was talking about, the goal of that was really to protect those parents. And I don't see it actually doing that. So it's going to be interesting to continue to test that case. But you just end up, people are looking for help and they see you having knowledge and not being able to, not shying away from the difficult conversations. And so it just kind of spirals from there.
Mm-hmm. It did. I mean, the Code of Ethics under Provision 7 is advancing the profession through policy and advocacy. And this new code, the 2025 code, really encourages nurses to have a seat at these tables. Nurses belong in these discussions because we understand the human cost of bureaucratic decisions, and if nurses don't speak, policy just gets written by people who've never touched a patient or, advocated for someone like you do. I mean, your life has been really so much of this is volunteer work. You're also on a farm. What do you got to do? Go check and see if the cows are pregnant today.
Yeah.
You got your own children, a husband.
Yeah, we will be pregnancy checking cows later today. It's going to be, I think we got 25 head that we're going to work. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, it is a lot of volunteer work. If people want to support the work that we're doing, please go to h4ml.org and click the donate button. I try to make everything that I do duplicatable. I want other people, I don't want you to have to need me. I want you to be able to go to my website and pull the information you need from it and walk away. And I think that that's one of the best ways that we can be advocates, is not only speaking up and having, quote, seats at these tables and being able to drive these policies, but teaching people how to advocate for themselves. And if there was a way that I could direct nursing policy or the future of healthcare, it would be to teach nurses how to do, it is, right? That's what resuscitating nursing is. Teach nurses how to advocate for themselves and then to spread that to others. Because we're in a place where it's hard to live out your ethics and morals. You're being butted up against by policies, by bureaucrats, whether that's administration or politics. And so I think that that's one thing that I hope people will take from this, is not that I have some special skills or knowledge or power. It's just acquired. You do what you can for your patients or the people in need. And that's really what makes all the difference.
It really does. I mean, that's why Nurses Out Loud exists, it's to give a voice to the voiceless, right? Nurse Kimberly loves to say, we'll stand in the gap for you. If you guys go to Substack, This is the new, I mean, this guy's my teenage son who is help editing these shows. When I told him that we need to post on Substack, he's like, Substack, what's Substack? And then he came to me and he was like, it's the number two, closely going up to the number one place for people to go to for information. I go, yes, it is. And now they have like a feed that kind of looks like a social media feed. So go check out Nurses Out Loud on Substack and follow us and support us because, we have Nurse Ashley's information on there, my information for the Code of Ethics, Nurse Melissa, who's educating nurses on functional medicine so you can have your own practice, Nurse Kimberly, who's doing remnant healthcare and putting nurses to work. And there's so much that we're doing, but it's amazing. So the best way to really find us, I think, is going to Substack, because every time a show drops, you'll get an email. And Ashley, I just looked at it and we have an 85% open rate on our emails.
Whoa.
That's
crazy.
Isn't that crazy? It's so crazy. So I love it. I think that we're no longer being silent. I see it at the nurses station all the time where, people are speaking up now. And I had a conversation with the doctor and he's like, we have these conversations, but what if someone, doesn't like it? He's like, we can get reported, they'll report it to HR. And I said, our conversations are grounded in science and, debate and discussions. I said, if somebody doesn't like it, that's their problem. I'm so over the emotional response. And because people are so emotional, right? It's not grounded in reality. It's grounded in emotion, and they're trying to shut down these types of conversations. But I told him, I said, listen, first of all, if anybody wants to come at it, I will write them a letter and I'll phrase it under the Code of Ethics in that language. That's why it's so important to know it, because it's that language and the verbiage in talking to leadership, right? That they can't deny it. They can't just say, oh, this is, gossip, or, people are just trying to incite, emotion or something. It's like, no, we have an obligation to engage in discussions and debate when it comes to science, because it's never settled. And he's like, yeah, you're right. And I said, and furthermore, there's more of us than them. But we've been everybody's so afraid, because, I can't risk getting fired or anything like that, to where it's like, no, guys, you have to use your voice. And I think that's what's so empowering about you and the work that you do, is because you understand ethics, you have a strong moral code, and you are also called by God to do the work, right? And we always hope that nurses are entering this profession because they feel called to servantship, right? And to help people, not because they like that they work 36 hours a week and they make fairly decent money.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. You said fear, they're afraid. And that is that emotion that you speak of. And I wanted to ask you about that, how your conversations about Vaccines Amen, Aaron Series' book, were being received at the nurses station. And it's so funny because it's 100% fear. It's sidestepping. It's being nervous about saying the wrong thing, when in reality, we're doing what we're supposed to do, because nurses bridge this gap between, science and doctors and the patient and what's really going on with that patient. And I think that that's why it's so important for us to bring our skill sets, is because it's the middle ground. It's blending. It's almost translational, right? Patients and doctors don't always understand or relate to each other very well. Doctors are laser focused on physiology and pharmacology. Patients are like symptomology, right? And so nurses can help bring those two worlds together and translate. And that's true with policy as well, because the nurses are the ones who are actually going to carry this stuff out. And so if we make these policies, the nurses have this wide breadth of experience, and they can look at it in a very real world, practical sense and say, you know what? While this has the best of intentions, unfortunately, I don't know how this is going to fall out. Can we investigate that? Let's assess this. Let's look at the interventions that need to happen so that way this can be successful.
Right. Nurses are there from the beginning of life, right? Even before, the life is born, and we're there at the end and everywhere in between. So we have this breadth of knowledge into the human experience, if you will. And that is why it's so important, I think, for nurses to use their voice. And so how did it go with the book? I mean, basically I just said, all right, guys, hey, little quiz time. What was the first vaccine, that was ever approved? And everybody, gave their there was probably 5 of us. And I was like, nope, Hep B. And guess how long the clinical trial was for it? And they're like, oh, 3 years, year, da, da, da. Nope, 5 days. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, this book is really interesting. And then I said, do you want me to read a little bit of the deposition with Stanley Plotkin, who is the godfather of vaccines and who educated all of us without us knowing it? And they're like, yeah. And I think one person walked away, and it's like, okay, go ahead, walk away, but if leadership were to say something to me, be like, this is fact. This guy, the godfather of vaccines, was deposed for 9 hours. And this is what his thoughts and his belief system is. I said, because that's exactly what it has become. All of us are thinking that this is grounded in evidence and science and safety. And it's not at all. It's grounded in a belief system. And that's what I would say, depending. But yeah, no, I mean, it was a pretty cool conversation at 3 a.m.
Yeah. And that translates directly to the court system. I mean, they're just following along. And that's one of the things, and I can't remember if it was Lindsay or Michelle that said this, but attorneys, I think it was Michelle, always defer to the medical professionals because that's not their scope of practice. And so I think that that's another huge aspect of really questioning and diving into that. Like, are we just doing things because other people say it's the right thing to do or that it's okay? Or are we knowledgeable about the facts of how it comes about? I had somebody post, I made some post on social media, and somebody's like, every single vaccine has been placebo safety studied. And I was like, try again. No, they haven't. None of them on the current schedule for children have been placebo safety studied. I'm not even sure that the new COVID variants have been placebo. The original one might have been placebo safety studied, but the new ones, I'm sure that they're probably being tested against the old ones. I don't know. I would have to go look that up. That's probably a good thing to do.
And that's exactly it. They say, oh, this one was good. And then they feel like they don't need to placebo trial the rest of them because they're using that first one. I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to stop that conversation right here. But let's talk about, this conversation. I think because we're watching ethics and law, I think start to align. We have Joseph Ladapo out in Florida, who I believe he eliminated all state mandated childhood vaccines to restore parent choice, right?
That's a process. It's really interesting because obviously Nurse Nicole, she's in Florida,
Yeah.
and I don't know. We would have to ask her about it, but I don't know if they've ended all childhood mandates or if they've just ended mandates for certain childhood vaccines. And there are pieces of that that have to go through the Florida legislature. And
Mhm.
that's really difficult. There have been a lot of things that have stopped in Florida because of their legislature um, refusing to vote on them. And so it's
Mm.
going to be really interesting to see how far Dr. Ladapo gets with all of that, because it has to go through the legislature, which is all the more reason that we all have to be. You're not expected to know everything, but at least plug yourself in with people who will be factual. That's one of the things that I try to do with Hoosiers for Medical Liberty, my nonprofit here in Indiana, is I try to make politics easy as possible. But I also tell people, don't just do what I say because I said it. You should always be questioning me. You should be going out
Mhm.
and researching. And so anytime I put a call to action out as far as like a legislative action, I will go and I will write a blog and I will combine all the information that I can find. And I'm not afraid, just like in this case, I don't think that the statute that I'm in disagreement with helped, but I'm not
Mhm.
sure that it hurt in this case. Now, future cases, it could very well hurt them, because all that DCS has to do is show that vaccination is a compelling governmental interest. Well, it's compelling because we're in charge of these kids' health and we have to do what's right for them based on the science. You know, and so it's very difficult, but I would rather be wrong. I would rather have given people all the information and letting them decide what they feel is best than just try to control and become another part of the another cog in the wheel of
Mhm.
bureaucracy, of trust the experts. I don't want any part of that.
Right. Exactly. I mean, when we get down to it, the expert, I think, on vaccines here is Aaron Siri, who's been deposing all these people. You know what I mean? Doctors and nurses, they don't know a tenth of what he knows.
Well,
They don't.
I loved his statement in the Senator Ron. Oh no, that wasn't with Ron Johnson. It was with, yeah, it was. I can't
Mm.
remember the senator that was questioning him. He's like, "Mr. Siri, you're not a doctor, are you?" And Aaron fires back. He's like, "No, I'm an attorney and I regularly depose vaccine experts, vaccinologists, etc. I can't just rely on a title for my
Exactly.
facts. I have to bring the details." And that was a paraphrase there, but his was more eloquently said. But he can't. He has to bring the facts. He has to show up, and that's why I'm excited about his book. And I think Dell, a lot of people during COVID, they chastised him and called him controlled opposition because he was saying, "Hey, this is going to be a 10-year battle." And
Mhm.
he wasn't wrong. I think we were
Yeah.
all hoping it would be much shorter, but I think he knew about this study, and he just knew for the cogs of bureaucracy to turn, it was going to take that long. And so we're like not quite halfway there yet, but it's going to be really interesting to see how things progress. And I'm really thankful that Dell and Aaron are willing to do all the things. And I would just
Mhm.
encourage people. That's another thing that I've been saying a lot lately is we have to quit worrying so much about what other people are doing and just do what we do really well, because there are always going to be people who we think are bad, misinformed, etc. Nurses
Yeah.
Out Loud, we're not looking at what this person is doing or what that person is doing and judging their actions or how they compare to us, but we're just doing what we do really well. We're having these tough conversations, we're shining light
Mhm.
on the darkness. And that's what I love about it, because we do have differing opinions here on
Mhm.
various things, but that's why we can work together, because we're not comparing or judging. We're We're like, okay, yeah. And then we keep doing the best we can as individuals. And that's it. Like, we worry
That's
about
right.
how well we can do.
Yeah, I mean, we have, Nurses Out Loud, we have listeners in Canada, Australia, Europe, you guys write to us saying, you're giving us courage to speak. And that's, global health and equity. And ethical nursing just doesn't stop at the border. It's a universal language of conscience, basically. And, I'll close with this because I want every nurse to take away from this show is that ethics is your armor, right? Liberty begins with literacy. So you need to know your laws. Go check out Resuscitating Nursing, get the workbook and work through it. Document and speak with compassion. I mean, truth doesn't need to anger people. It just needs clarity and find community. Like Nurses Out Loud, Hoosiers for Medical Liberty, Righteous RN, Functional Nurse Academy. We're not alone, guys. And I do see here, like, gosh, man, it's been 5 years since my eyes were open. And to see how all of us have come together has just been amazing. And any final thoughts or message, Ashley?
Just keep doing the next right thing and always be humble enough to recognize when you have room to grow. But don't let a lack of knowledge stop you from helping somebody who hasn't quite reached your level. It's like on a ladder, we're all at different levels. And so you can help the person behind you while still, working towards becoming more and more knowledgeable, because we all have gifts to share with each other that we don't necessarily, or they don't necessarily possess.
That's right. All right. Great. Well, until next time, friends, be safe, be well, and God bless.
Shining light into darkness, thank you for tuning in to Nurses Out Loud.